Okay.
Well, you see, you can call him JG and you can call me JC.
No, that's never going to work. And if I call you Mr. Gale, it sounds far too respectful. So I don't really know what to do on the call. So, but welcome everybody. Welcome to Founder Friday. I love these points in every month where we get to speak to somebody awesome and look at what makes them them. You know, what makes them tick and what makes them crazy enough to be a founder of something, and sometimes even a founder of more than one thing. So today we are in some ways privileged to have what some people might refer to as my boss, because he is the CEO of Boardroom Advisors, and therefore the person that brought me into the fold on Boardroom Advisors and the ultimate head honcho. So I have to be careful along the way to make sure I don't lose my role inside Boardroom Advisors. I quite like it. All right. And I'm joined here by Mr. Gale, who I will call Mr. Gale today, as there's two Johns on the call, and Mr. Gupta, who I'll call Mr. Gupta just for fun. All right. So I wonder, Annie, before we go too far, could you introduce yourself to everybody, and then Mr. Gale, and then we'll go to Mr. Courtney.
Sure. I'm Ani Gupta. I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal. I work with startups. I've got a tech background, and currently I'm focused around remote work practices and consultancy and helping companies and teams transition into this wonderful world of Zoom fatigue.
Thank you, Annie. Great to have you here. Mr. Gale, who are you?
Good morning, all. So I'm John Gale. I've been involved with startups for a long time. That includes being a vice president of a merger and acquisition unit within Thomson. Thomson is now Thomson Reuters, and 12 years in Silicon Valley, being on the board of the Silicon Valley Association of Startup Entrepreneurs and working with lots of startups. And so now I'm in Europe, and my business is to sell advisory services to startups.
Fantastic. Great to have you as ever, John. Really appreciate it. So, Mr. Courtney, or boss as I like to call you, who are you and what are you doing here?
Well, I'm doing here because you invited me, Stuart. Gee, I don't know. What am I doing here? Listen, you said you wanted to ask me some questions about being a founder and what it's like and lessons and that sort of stuff. So happy to tell you stuff that I've done. Where do you want me to start?
How many businesses so far?
So far 7. And I do say so far. Listen, I'm 109 years old. Look at me. But is this the last one? I doubt it. I think I'm going to be one of those guys who's 85 and is on business number 9 or 10 by then. My last one, my 6th one, was a digital marketing agency, and I sold it almost exactly 5 years ago. And I retired for 3 months, and it was great. I played lots of cricket. It was fabulous. Then the cricket season ended, and I was so bored. So
Can you practice the cricket? Was there no nets or something you could do? You just had to jump back into a business?
Yeah, listen, I'm lucky enough to do some overseas tours and that sort of stuff, but it comes to an end at some stage. When there's frost on the ground and snow in the air, you can't really play that much cricket. So I did get very bored, and then the seeds of business number 7 were sown. So yeah, I do honestly believe that I'll be like Rupert Murdoch at 85 and still running something or other.
So run us through quickly before Annie and John start their questions. What are the 7? Start us from just the topics that they covered and the location.
Yeah, there's not 7 different topics because there were overlaps and so on. But agricultural chemicals and fertilizers, probably the least sexy. Cricket bats, management consultancy, corporate finance, digital marketing, and now this fella, Boardroom Advisors, providing part-time executive directors to startups, scale-ups, and SMEs.
So from cricket bats to boardroom advice, I love it. We've really got to step into that journey at some point. Do you want to give them the brief, though, about what Boardroom Advisors is so that everybody's got an idea of the latest one?
Thank you for the option to plug. Listen, we operate nationally throughout the UK. We've got some chap, Stuart, who's going to be doing something for us in Portugal, and another chap in Ireland. Talking to some people in the States, by the way, John Gale. So more than happy to talk to you about that. So yeah, part-time executive directors. So when companies need a heavy hitter, but they perhaps don't need, can't afford a full-time person, then a part-time one, either as an interim or longer term. But we're members of the client's team, just not there every day of the week. So that kind of, that's it, really.
And how many people like me and Damien have you got kicking around so far?
Well, very, very few like the two of you. So we've got 14 regional directors and 60-something advisors. I've started to lose count now, so 75 of us covering the whole of the UK and bits of Europe.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
And some wonderful people. I must say, it's one of the best things that we've done. The quality of people we've got is fantastic. Yourself excluded, of course.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good British we're coming through. Love it. And I should say, I'm obviously regional director looking to open up Portugal this year, and within the Southwest, within Damien's team, I'm an advisor within his regional director role. So I get to kind of play in the two different ways. And it's interesting because I'm just doing my first gig with Boardroom Advisors now. It's been very interesting, and working with a different regional director, Denise, who's been super awesome in sorting everything out. So I'm a big fan of the model. It's working really well. Annie, you've obviously only just met John. I wonder, have you got any questions for him you'd like to ask?
Yeah, sure. So tell us, what was your most favorite time in what business that you remember, and the worst time in what business, and what learnings did you take from that?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I guess the best time is always the current one, but looking back on previous ones, I guess with the cricket business, that was great fun because we launched in a blaze of publicity. We were lucky to get on the front page of the Times and the Daily Telegraph on the same day, and then we did some TV stuff and radio stuff and so on. So publicity was great, and then we were dealing with professional cricket clubs. So we supplied the helmets to Lancashire County Cricket Club, for example, but all of our customers were amateurs, and but we brushed with a lot of stars and saw a lot of cricket and went to test matches and this sort of stuff. And because cricket's my passion, then obviously that was a fabulous time. It was also the worst time because. Listen, I've been lucky. 7 businesses, 6 have been successful. 1 has not been successful, and you can guess which one that was. It was the one that was dearest to my heart, and it was the cricket one. Successful in many ways in terms of the brand getting launched and established, and people using it and people liking it and so on. But actually, a business is about making money, and every year it lost me money, and eventually I had to close the business. So there's, I'm lucky. I think Americans say, don't they, that you're not a proper entrepreneur until you've had a failure. Well, okay, I can tick that little box, and lots of lessons from that too. Don't make your hobby your business. I remember I was going onto the cricket field and I'd been selling cricket clothing to my teammates, and one of my teammates were going out to field, and one of my teammates says, "Oh, John, these trousers don't fit." And another teammate later on, different game, probably different month, said, "John, this wool sweater's shrunk." I said, "Have you washed it in hot?" He said, No. My mother knows how to wash wool jumpers. It was this big. It had just got like that. So, mixing a hobby and business isn't a terribly good idea, because you don't necessarily make the best decisions. And I also, I roped in some of my friends at the cricket club to work in the business, and when it didn't make money and we had to close it, that wasn't great either. So lots of lessons, and I kind of learned a lot of my lessons in that one particular business.
So can I just add, can I ask you one more thing? So, we hear a lot of this cliched phrase that everybody's here, follow your passion. If you follow your passion, you'll be successful. So is that a myth, or do you think there is something more to it?
No, I think that's right, but I would separate personally, it's just my opinion, I would separate your hobby from your business, but you have to be passionate about your business. You have to really believe you've got something different. And it's kind of a bit like being captain of a sports team. There are some tough times and there are some tough conversations that you have to have. And if you're not passionate, if you don't truly believe that you've got something that the market wants, then when those tough times come, you're not really going to quite make it through. So, you really need to want to do it. And, for those entrepreneurs who sort of have an idea and think, well, should I, shouldn't I? The answer for me would be no, don't. You really need to want to do it in order to get through those tough times and to see it through. But perhaps stay away from your hobby, perhaps stay away from, I suppose the only thing I was going to say, friends and family. I've worked with my wife, not in that particular business, but in other businesses, and that's been very successful. We work brilliantly as a team. She tries to cover up all my faults.
Is that down to you or down to her?
Oh, entirely down to her. She covers up most of my faults. I'm afraid not all of them, but at least some.
Good answer. Thank you.
So, John, you've mentioned cricket several times along the way. I mean, there's often a link between successful CEOs and sport. Why don't you give people a little bit of the background that you have about cricket? Because it's not just like a passing fascination or an idle hobby for you, is it? It's a real deal.
Well, no, but it is. It's a hobby. And listen, I always wanted to, when I was a little kid growing up, what do you want to do when you grow up, Sonny? Well, I'm going to be captain of England. That was always what I said. Now, I haven't been captain of England, but I've been privileged enough to be selected for the England seniors side. Listen, we're all old and crocked and falling apart. But I've got an England badge and an England cap somewhere in the cupboard.
Well, and you've toured, right? You've toured and you've played very competitively in that seniors side.
Yeah, listen, although we're old, we're still very competitive. In order to keep playing, listen, I'm 63. In order to keep playing into your 60s, you need to be very competitive because it's a bit like a game of whack-a-mole with injuries. There's always one that you're going around the body treating. There's always something. And in order to get through that, you really need to be very competitive and want to prove it to yourself, want to prove it to other people, or you'd give up, really. But again, I'd probably do that till I'm 85 if I could.
So before we turn to John Gale for a couple of questions, and I would say, Annie's questions are good, but watch John Gale's questions, okay? They may just trip you up.
Thanks.
I'm just getting started.
Do you think there is any correlation between the attitudes for sport and the attitudes of business, or do you think that's a cliche that's not necessary?
No, I like that, actually. I see lots of parallels. I've given one about being captain of a team and starting a business or running a business. I think that's very true. I think being able to, successful captains of any sports team, for me, it's not about, it is partly about strategy and tactics, but it's also about getting the best out of people. So both are true in sport and in business. Determination, overcoming obstacles, being prepared. Yeah, there's lots and lots and lots of similarities, I think. I'm a great fan of that comparison.
Thank you. Mr. Gale, I open the floor to you.
Okay, thanks, Stu. So, John, there's several organizations like yours in the United States, and as an outsider looking at them, they all seem fairly similar. What's your key differentiator between your organization, Boardroom Advisors, and other organizations like yours?
Thanks, John. I'm not that familiar with the competition in the States. I have looked at one or two. Certainly the competition that we have in the UK, we're an odd breed. We're neither a management consultancy company, nor are we a recruitment company. Where we're different in the sense that, it's part-time directors, which is, it is partly consultancy and but consultants are external and objective. And for us, we're internal. We're just not there every day of the week. The main differentiators when I'm out there talking to potential clients or in a networking situation, we can have people on site working in a company, senior people in days. And, if we're competing against a recruitment company, senior people, they're always on at least 3 months notice, sometimes 6. So it'll take a company, particularly a VC or an equity company, it'll take them 6 to 9 months to get somebody senior in place. We can have somebody in place in 6 to 9 days. So that's quite a differentiator for us in that particular marketplace. The fact that we're internal to the company and the fact that we don't have a long-term contract with clients. Our people are there on a month-by-month basis. Our clients can, each and every month they decide whether our people are doing a good job. And if they are, how many days they want them for next month. At any stage, they can pause us, they can cancel us, they can increase the number of days, they can reduce the number of days. Clients completely in control. And they can even try before they buy. And, we'll do a strategic review at a relatively low cost. They can see their guy in action and so on. There's lots of benefits to the way in which we work. But we are slightly different. There are other people who do what we do, but for different roles. So there are part-time finance directors, there are part-time marketing directors, part-time IT directors. So there are companies doing that, and they're very similar. The roles that we have and the roles that we try and get are more of a general nature. I guess multi-skilled is a sexier way of saying that. So people who have, we say all of our advisors have scale businesses, often their own, mostly their own, but they have always scaled a business. So in order to do that, you need to know enough about all the various functions within a business, from finance and marketing and IT and so on. You're not necessarily a specialist in any one of those things, but you know enough in order to manage those functions and people within those functions. So typically the roles that we put out there are operations directors, commercial directors, strategy directors, and the biggest of all is managing directors. That's our most common. Part-time managing directors, that sounds a bit odd. Yeah, but if you're trying to scale up a company and you want somebody senior and you can't afford, a full-time senior, very senior person, you can perhaps afford a part-time one.
So we've got a couple of questions come in from the audience, and just to cut across you there, Mr. Gale, sorry about that. So from Francis over there at Set Squared Exeter, she's asking, how do you select the advisor to fit the company?
Hi, Francis. Yeah, really good question. Now, every prospective client says to us, oh, well, you must have somebody who knows something about our industry. Now, listen, we've got 75 people. We've senior people, and they've all done lots of stuff like I have in life. So I'd be surprised if we couldn't cover most industries. But to have somebody within an industry bubble coming into an industry bubble, it isn't necessarily the right thing. Sometimes having somebody from outside the bubble is a fresh pair of eyes and new experiences. I remember when I was I did 10 years as a management consultant, and I asked some of my clients, obviously the ones who were complimentary about me, and I said, well, what's the most important thing I brought you? And they all said, or most of them said, it was the cross-fertilization of ideas from one industry to another. So I think having somebody outside the bubble is useful. But again, we have so many people. We've operated in most bubbles. So it's, we try I'll answer your question in a different way. We try and do an identikit with the client. What does the perfect person look like to you? By that, what roles have they done? Do you want somebody commercial? Do you want somebody who's been trained in strategy? Try and get the identikit, and then go back into our advisor base and work out who is the best client. And it doesn't have to be the nearest advisor. it's always the best advisor for the role. And particularly now, when everything's done on Zoom, you can take an advisor from Scotland and beam it to Exeter if that's the right thing to do. Always the best advisor for the job.
And John, sort of reflecting on my recent experience for the client that I'm working with, it was as much about personality and cultural fit as well as skills. So
Yeah.
I think they chose to not necessarily interview, but to meet 3 of us or so before they made their final decision, and they used that kind of what was the chemistry like, can we actually work with them stuff to make the final decision, because they could see, I think, advantage in each of us in the sort of beauty parade moment of working out which one was right fit.
Yeah, and that's obviously very right, because you have to have some chemistry and so on, and that's one of the good things about having a large selection of people that they can meet, typically 2, and choose the best. And then if they're not sure, we often start with clients with a strategic review, which incorporates a workshop, but it's a full strategic review, and they get to see their chosen or their potential advisor in action at that situation. And if the chemistry doesn't quite work as they hoped it might, we can always switch people out and switch somebody else in. But having a choice is a big thing, I think.
So in the best spirit of the daily briefing, Francis, do you have a follow-up on that? Is there anything else that you want to ask, John? You can always drop it in the chat if you have. And back to you, Mr. Gale. Sorry for interrupting you there. Just wanted to bring that question in from Francis. You got any more you want to ask, Mr. Courtney?
Well, I'd like to make a comment first. So I'm really interested in what you said, because the competitor of yours in the United States that I'm most familiar with tends to place people in who are basically doing business development roles.
Okay.
And so they see it as a way to increase revenue. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But that seems to be their primary focus. So to me, you're doing more of what I would think somebody like you should do.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we do part-time commercial directors, which would perhaps be very similar to that. But ops directors and strategy directors and managing directors are obviously very different. And non-exec directors, we do those too. What we have are generalist or multi-skilled people who can do all of those roles. And I've actually I've literally performed all of those roles myself personally. So it's that kind of multi-skilled person that we have. If they want a finance specialist or a lead generation specialist, our commercial directors are possibly a little wider than just lead generation.
So in this strange world that we're currently in, how do you advise your the people on your staff that you're placing in a client? How do you advise them to establish and grow a trust relationship, which of course is vital for their success?
Yeah, it's obviously a little bit more difficult when everything's done by Zoom. If you're face to face, you can. It is that much easier. You also find with Zoom, everything on Zoom seems a little more focused, doesn't it? If you're running a workshop with a client, you've had to prepare your slides in advance, and you're perhaps presenting them without much interaction with the client until perhaps a break in the slideshow. So it's all very focused, isn't it? So it's more difficult to form a personal relationship in those circumstances. It takes longer, I guess, but it is still possible. Face to face, much easier. And listen, we always try, and we always hope to be the trusted advisor for the client. Our people are all very experienced. It's a matter of having that experience on call and the client being able to tap into it, and that's how you build up trust over a period of time. That they dip into that pool of experience and it helps them and so on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Stu, I've got another question coming through, but I need to give it a little more thought. Why don't I pass it back to you for a bit?
Oh, fantastic. Well, I guess while I give Annie a moment just to prepare for his stuff as well, I would ask you, John, some people would say you got to be a little bit crazy to start one company because it's a voyage of almost certain doom, and you're going to go through hell along the way. And to do 2 or 3, once you go from foolish, I'm not sure where you end up. By the time you get to 6 or 7, somebody somewhere's got to call you an idiot, right? Whoever that is, usually related to you. So are you an idiot, or are people like you idiots? And
Yep.
what's the real reason you would choose to make this serial kind of founder story?
Yeah, yes. I think my family would call me an idiot. I asked my wife Kath about boredom advisors. Should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? She said, "You're going to do it, and if you don't do this, you'll do something else. So, if you've got the passion for it, crack on and do it." Why? I don't know. There's something inside people like me that drives us to create something. That's all it is. It's not about the money. It's about a passion to create something from nothing. Any money is just a measure of how successful you've been, not money in its own right. I mean, I guess a few years back when, I had mouths to feed and mortgages to pay and so on. These days, luckily, I don't. But I still create businesses because it's that passion to create something. And you have to have an element of madness in you. Yeah.
And how do you measure success then if it's not by money?
Well, it is partly by money, isn't it? That is the acid test. Why was my cricket business a failure? Because it never made money. Every year it lost me money. So that is a failure, isn't it? It was a success in other ways, but that is the ultimate test of how successful a business is. It doesn't really matter that people bought the brand and people use the products and some people like the products, and that really, at the end of the day, if it doesn't make money, why are you doing a business? That has to be the ultimate test.
Annie, do you want to follow that one up?
Yeah, in fact, I recognize the madness that you guys are talking about. In fact, it occurred to me when I went to first time when I went to Nazaré. So if you guys don't know, Nazaré is this place in Portugal which has probably the biggest waves ever recorded that people surf. So big wave surfers go there, and these are ridiculously big waves. We're talking about 30 meters, right? And I've seen some of them, and I've seen those guys who go into those waves every day. And I've read stories about this guy who broke his back. He's actually from the UK, I think last year, and he came back, and I saw him surf, right? After breaking his back, he comes back after a year, and he's surfing those crazy waves again. Why? Because there is a level of madness, right? That is, you have to be crazy to do that. And I know a lot of serial entrepreneurs who feel the same way, that they're not satisfied. To kind of take off from there a little bit, and you talked about money as being the primary motivator, or not motivator, I guess a quantifier of the success of the business. A lot of people today are talking about conscious capitalism. There's a lot of focus on social impact businesses, and how do you have one? Do you have businesses in the UK that you would like to? Those kind of businesses that you'd like to kind of get involved with? Because I guess their primary drive is not making money, which is kind of the antithesis of capitalism, but to make change. But how do they quantify is the big question in the world. But how do you define that shift that we might be seeing, that people are moving towards conscious capitalism, as to use a phrase?
Yeah, and listen, that's great. If you've got a cause like that and you want to make a business, whether it's a for-profit business or not, that's going to do good in the world, that's just fabulous. You can't really top that. I'm kind of old school. I've separated business from. I do some charity stuff, and I do pro bono mentoring, still bits of it, but I've kind of separated doing good from business. Now I hope in the businesses, particularly in boredom advisors, I hope we do good in the sense that I hope we help some startups and some scale-ups avoid some of the pitfalls that all of us who have scaled businesses have fallen into. So that's doing good in one sense. It's not saving the planet, but it's helping people, and that's important. And it's important. The advisors that we have, they're generally, not all, but generally 50s and 60s. They want to put something back into a community. They want to help businesses, and they also want to have fun. They want to not, they don't want to be in the corporate machine anymore. They want to have a portfolio type of lifestyle and enjoy their business, and feel like they're making a difference and feeling like they're doing good. So certainly in those senses, then yes. But listen, we're not saving the planet with board and advisors, but hopefully we're helping some startups and scale-ups.
Okay, I'd like to follow that up. And there was a question somewhat related to what I'm going to ask you from, I think, Pedro. Yes, about generations, right? So there is this thing, and I've worked in corporates and I've worked with startups, and there is this quite a visible difference between how people after a certain generation or age think and advise you versus people of a certain other generation. There is this generation of millennials and blah 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 and baby boomers and whatnot. In your experience today, is that a hindrance if your set of advisors in your company are of a certain generation, or do you think a mix of different generational advisors should be there to balance each other off? What do you suggest? How do you approach it?
Listen, I think advisors, the better advisors, have had lots of experience. Why? Because I always say to people, look at all these grey hairs, right? They're mistakes I've made, and look at all these missing hairs up here. They're the really terrible mistakes. Now, you can't make all those mistakes. If you're still 26 years old, you've only made a handful, haven't you? I've made a lot of mistakes. What I try not to do is to make the same mistake twice. So you having an advisor with grey hairs, there's nothing wrong with that. Do we think differently sometimes? Listen, my son's an entrepreneur, God help him. He's just raised $250,000 on crowdfunding just before lockdown, so he was quite lucky. And he and I think differently. We work quite well together because he thinks differently and I think differently, and you can find, he says, well, this is the new way of doing it. And I said, well, yeah, that's great, but what about these mistakes I've made in a similar type of circumstance? He goes, yeah, okay, you might have a point there. It's a blend, but yeah, having an advisor who's very young is tricky because they haven't made as many mistakes, and therefore perhaps they haven't got as many lessons and tips to pass on.
But there's also a case to be made that you become less risk averse. Perhaps the business needs to get in and just jump into the deep end, right?
Yeah.
Is that true?
No, I'm not sure I'd go along with that, really. I haven't got any more risk averse as I've gone on. Here I am. I've started Boardroom Advisors. I'm 63. That doesn't sound like somebody who's...
And let's just remind everybody that he also works with me and Damien, so kind of risk averse. I'm not sure that's like in his DNA.
Good point. Well made. So no, I think it's, for me, I think it's more about, I think the biggest world of difference isn't quite so much between ages, but between enterprise and early stage and smaller businesses, or small businesses and big businesses. If you run a small business, if you started in a back bedroom as I have, if you started in a garage as I have, then there's a mindset, and you have to hustle. In the early days, there's a hustle that you have to do because you don't have a big budget. You have to do marketing yourself. You have to roll up your sleeves and get stuff done. Now, there's a lot of people who might do that in big corporates, but less of them. There's more politics, there's layers of management, things take longer, and there's a different mindset. I've worked in a PLC, I've advised PLCs. It's not a world that I'm terribly comfortable with, really. And so somebody asked a question about the type of advisors that we have. One of our touch points is has the advisor worked in startup, scale up, SME? Does he inhabit that world, or has he been 35 years in IBM? In which case, it's probably not for us, because he probably wouldn't be for our clients. So for me, it's more about that mindset, and that comes from working in smaller companies and particularly startups.
Right.
Putting my mirror up to this for a sec, John, before we go to questions from Tiana and others. I would also say, with all the different people you've introduced me to through Boardroom Advisors, they're really interesting personalities, and I have learned from every single one of them in every single conversation I've had. And people like Isabel, who helped us run the demo nights down in Plymouth, and the way she stepped in, and the way Tim stepped into a panel discussion literally with 2 minutes notice, and the personality that he shone on that. The way that Denise has run the region where I just got involved with this gig and stuff, and literally there's no conversation I have with any group of Boardroom Advisors people where I do not learn something, and it's really quite cool. Thank
you. That's very kind of you to say that.
Mr. Gale, you want to get in front of Tiana's question, or?
Yeah, I've got three, but why don't I just put in two and save the other one for later? So the first question is, how do you define the phase that your business is in now? In other words, obviously you've gone through different phases. So help us understand the phase that you're in now.
Yeah, we're still an early stage business. We've only been expanding Boardroom Advisors for 15, 16 months. So we're still very early stage. We've gone from no pipeline to a thin pipeline to a lumpy pipeline of business. We've done very well in terms of getting some really good people on board and structures and processes, but we're an early stage business. We're coming out of startup mode into slightly more established mode, but it's still very much early stage.
Okay, so Stu, let me ask this one, and then after he finishes, passes it to Tiana. My next question is, okay, great. So how are you going to do what some people would call a leapfrog up to the next level in your business? In other words, don't just grow at 20%, but grow at a big chunk in some interesting way. How do you plan to do that?
Listen, it's a real challenge. The entrepreneur's mindset is not to be limited. And several friends of mine have said, well, John, why didn't you just start this on a small scale in Bristol and then perhaps grow into Gloucestershire, and when you're done Gloucestershire, we'll move into Worcestershire and so on. But an entrepreneur's mindset, or at least my mindset, is how can we conquer the world? How can we do something on a grand scale? So we've built a structure in the UK, and there are bits that don't work as well as they should and need development and so on. But I'm already expanding into Europe, starting conversations in the States, and so on. So it's about broadening those. Don't stop. You've got to keep going, keep broadening those. I'm not sure I'm answering your question here, but help me out. Which bits have I missed?
Well, I can see where a logical expansion of your business is to open up a new country like Portugal, like Belgium, etc. But I was thinking more of how can you do a different leapfrog that bypasses barriers and puts you on a different playing field where you're perceived in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that's a little bit further away from us, really. I think in the stage we're at, we need to consolidate in the UK. We need to continue some gentle expansion into Europe, possibly into the States, and it's only been a while since some of our propositions been refined. When we launched, we were going to major on non-exec directors, and the part-time executive directors was going to be a second string. So we've pivoted the business because the demand has been there for part-time executive directors, and in the SME world, less of a demand for non-exec directors. We do them, don't get me wrong, but it's a secondary thing that we do. So So we're still in that stage of the business where we're pivoting, where we're learning as we go. We're expanding the services, and so on. So we've got a period of consolidation to do, as well as some gentle expansion still, but some consolidation before we do a big ramp up. Ask me that question in another year, I think.
Okay, great. Stu, I've got one more question, but I'll save that for when it's convenient for you.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. So I've got two here from the chat.
Sorry, can I just
let me do the chat, Annie. Let me do the chat because they've both been waiting. So they've been very patient. They haven't hustled me. They haven't WhatsApped me or anything to make sure I answer questions. So Tiana asks, with all this kind of parallel business stuff that you're doing, how does a new idea pop up while being all in developing the ongoing one? What's the thought journey behind that? I think the hashtag on that part is probably idiot again, right? Like,
yeah, probably. It's funny. Business ideas just drop in sometimes, and it's funny. People said, well, you've sold one business, and presumably, you had some time off, and because you had time off, then you had time to think about new ideas, new businesses, new products, and that sort of stuff. Actually, it's when you're busiest that your brain's really working very hard, and it's like, wow, we could do it that way. Nobody does it that way. Is that crazy? Or is it great? You don't know. Let's try. That sort of stuff just drops in your brain, or drops in my brain anyway. And more so when I'm busy than when I'm quiet. When I'm, sunbathing on a beach, I want to sunbathe on a beach and read a book. But I guess things still drop in your head, but more drop in when I'm busy. Don't know if that answers your question, really.
Well, Tiano dropped something in the chat if we didn't answer that very well. And Francis asked, so it's a bit more back to the boardroom advisors model. How do boardroom advisors support their clients through their network connections? How does that bit work?
Oh, thank you. What a lovely question. Yeah, I mean, very important. The older you are, obviously, the more mistakes you make, but also the more contacts you pick up, the more ways in which you've, as you get older, as you get more experience, as you've done more businesses, you pick up more stuff. In day-to-day life, it's things like you always need, you always need access to a plumber and an electrician, and these things in life. And when you find one, you hang on to them for dear life. Well, it's the same in business. You find a good accountant, you find a good lawyer, you find good people. You kind of hang on to them, and you create relationships, and if they're good people, you pass them on to your clients, and recommend them to your clients. That's part of the experience, I guess.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Now, quick time check with everybody. We've got about 10 minutes left of our scheduled time today. So, Annie, John, if one more question each, if that's okay. And Mr. Courtney, at the end, I'm going to ask you for your top tip for first-time founders. Any one pearl of wisdom you'd like to give somebody who's watching the call today and thinking, do you know what? I might just give that thing a try.
Okay.
All right. So, Annie, over to you first.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just add two things. One is a observation on what John was talking about, about where you're looking at to expand and go to the next level in your business. And one of the things in my background, I've been remote. I've been a digital nomad for several years. I've been part of companies for the last 10 years that have been completely distributed. And I find a little bit of resistance, especially in the strange times we are living in, for people to get away from the geographical mindset, right? Even you're talking about the US and Portugal. Can you, and this is a question, why not look at companies as a global entity with people all over the place? Even founders could be from different cultures. Is that a cultural thing? I wanted to understand from you, in your experience, when you think of just the geographical area and not the market, is that a limiting thing, or is it because of comfort levels, or is it, is it something else? Because the way I look at companies is very different.
Yeah, I guess it's all of those things, really. And listen, one of the great things about, there's lots of terrible things about COVID-19. One of the great things is that suddenly everything is international. Everything is over Zoom. You two guys are in in Lisbon. I'm sitting here in Bristol. Stuart, I have no idea where you are, probably Exeter. But you could be in the States. You could be in Moscow. You could be in your back garden. It doesn't matter. And suddenly, a lot of those regional shackles that people have, not just mine, but everybody's, it's like, wow. And, for example, with board of advisors, the idea, the concept is that there's regions within the UK, they have regional directors, and within those regions they have advisors who live locally to that regional director and so on. And it is geographical based. But now suddenly everything's done by Zoom. So if Stuart, as regional director for Portugal, has a client in Portugal, well, do we have to have somebody in Portugal advising them? Well, in today's market, we certainly don't. We can take any one of our 75 people, and by Zoom, they can be an advisor virtually. So suddenly all those geographical boundaries have just completely disappeared. Now, is that going to be the case going forward? Certainly more so than it was, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And my last question, I was going to actually kind of upend Stu's last question, but I'm going to change mine. In your current client set, what is the one big or the biggest challenge that you're seeing people are talking about, especially in the times we're living in and going forward? What is the one big thing that you have realized that they're all concerned about?
Well, obviously, when lockdowns first started, everybody's business people's main concern was funding and finance and cash flow and so on, and everybody was caught rabbit in the headlights because nobody planned it. Nobody planned for this situation to happen. Now we're kind of getting used to it, and to different degrees, obviously. Some coping better than others. So it's coming out of that lockdown situation, and how can you address that? And the unknown is the biggest fear for everybody at the moment. Is there going to be a second wave? How long is the lockdown going to last? Masks, travel, all that stuff. We don't know the answer. So uncertainty is terrible. It's kind of almost better to know the worst situation, being able to deal with it. So one of the things I've been doing on webinars is trying to help people plan for coming out of lockdown. How do you do it? And it's analyzing business in traditional ways, things like SWOT analysis and traditional tools like that, but also having a look at perhaps some crisis management tools and how do you do what's likely to change with COVID-19. For example, there's less likelihood of foreign travel. Or it's going to be less common, or it's going to be more expensive, or there are some things that are going to change in the world because of the virus. And then how does that affect your industry? What changes are likely to be seen in your industry? What changes then are likely to be seen, or do you need to plan for in your own business? Do you need the same resources, the same number of staff, same premises? What about your value proposition? Does that remain the same? Or do you need to pivot your business according to different circumstances? So I think my answer to your question would be the biggest thing on everybody's lips is how do we plan the heck out of this so that we've got the best chance of surviving, thriving, making money?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Mr. Gale, you get the honor of the last question.
Well, thanks, Stu. So let me paint a scenario for you. You've closed a client, you've placed an advisor in with that client, and let's say he's working 2 or 3 days a week, and he's now in it about 2-3 weeks. And he calls you up and says, well, John, the real problem here is that the CEO just isn't capable of doing his job. Tell me what to do now.
Whoa,
I told you
you warned me.
right?
Well done, Stuart. You warned me. Wow, that's a tricky one. Never met that one before. What do you do? I guess if he's on the road to becoming a trusted advisor, then his role is to help the CEO get through that. It's not his job to replace the CEO or to talk to the investors or the rest of the board. That's not his role. His role is to help the business, and I guess in that circumstance, I would recommend to him to try and help the CEO do his job as best he could. The more he does that, the more he'll be a trusted advisor for the business. And the CEO is the main decision maker in the business. So that has to be, what's right. That has to be, in my head, that feels right.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we just got a little catch up here with Tiana. So at the end of her chat, she asked, did you have any pushbacks by potential clients due to their mindset being late?
The mindset being late.
Yeah, so I think by that she means basically them not really understanding where you're coming from.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, listen, this world is made up of lots of different people and personalities, and some are late, some are early, some are, life's made up of all sorts, and you just have to be ready for all sorts and do the best you can.
Fantastic. All right. So, John, what pearl of wisdom do you want to give to people on this call? First-time founders particularly is our target, and what we're trying to do here is show them the DNA of people who've been serial idiots or success stories or whatever you want to call it. So, what pearl of wisdom can you decant to them today?
Well, listen, there's lots of, as I say, lots of mistakes. I would say getting advice throughout your business career. So, in incubators and accelerators, there are mentors available generally. Use them, abuse them. They're essential to them. But when you get out of the accelerator and out of the incubator, and you're in the, you're in the real world without as much support system, get a mentor, get somebody. Outside that support system, you'll probably have to pay them. It doesn't have to be a board advisor person. Get somebody who can be your mentor and help and guide, and somebody you can bounce ideas off. And as the business gets bigger, perhaps they're your chairman or your non-exec director or whatever. There's so many smaller businesses that, sometimes family businesses, sometimes groups of people, and they have no external advice, and they think it's really. Sometimes they're thinking it's expensive or old school or unnecessary or whatever. If you think it's expensive, take a small bit of it. If you think it's old school, my suggestion would be, old guys like me have at least made those mistakes and learned something from them. And we can probably help you not make some of those mistakes. So keep getting the advice on board would be my biggest tip.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for opening up and talking with everybody as you have done today. I think it's been a really insightful time into what makes you tick, which is our goal in every session. So thanks for bringing it there. And thank you for Annie and for John for joining. For everybody who's on the call, thank you for your questions as well. And if you want to stay up to date with future events at Canopy, there's a nice web link I just stuck in the chat there. And if you like what you got here today, why not consider joining the tribe like many people who are on this call today and being more part of the community day to day. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday and a lovely weekend.
Auf fin de semana. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Auf fin de semana.
Nice to meet you all.